This is City Talk. I'm Eric Schmidt. Thank you for joining us today as we find out what is new, exciting, and challenging in the city of Tigard, Oregon. Like many of the Portland metro area suburban communities, Tigard is experiencing a lot of growth, business activity, and development. Like many of the Portland metro area communities, Tigard is also dealing with homelessness, vandalism, drug use, and an increase in property crime. Jason Snyder is the mayor of Tigard. He's been dealing with the good, the bad, and the ugly in Tigard since being elected mayor in 2018. Mayor Snyder, thank you for joining us today on this edition of City Talk.
Good to see you, Eric. Glad I could join you.
Too bad we had to do it virtually, but at least we're going to have some good questions and answers today, so I'm looking forward to it. Much of your term of being mayor in Tigard has involved dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the challenges that the virus has presented. Was the city of Tigard in a position to effectively deal with the coronavirus, or have you had to make a lot of adjustments?
Well, I would say yes to both, and we were certainly prepared. And as you point out now, my term as mayor has been more. I've had more time with COVID and the pandemic than without it as mayor. So it's really started to define, the way I have thought about my entire term so far. But the city was well positioned for dealing with any kind of an emergency, and so we've got an emergency management system that is set up throughout the county, the state, and is really well positioned to serve us in any sort of an emergency. And so that's the foundation. And we use that system anytime we have an emergency, whether it's a large water main rupture or any kind of a major incident. COVID has certainly stretched that and required that we have a more sustainable model for our emergency management, and the city has had to make many adjustments. We've adjusted how we're providing certain services, whether it's the library and takeout services, or how we're interacting with customers in the planning department and engineering. All those things have changed. Well, the way we do park maintenance and clean bathrooms had to change pretty quickly. And then our court services and even our utility billing and payments windows all had to have pretty significant changes pretty rapidly.
Are these changes permanent? Are you ever going to go back to the normal such as it was?
It's a great question, and there are some things that have come out of COVID that we've learned that we intentionally won't change, and even the state has noticed some of this. So one example of something that's changed for the better is the amount of community involvement and engagement we get in city council meetings, and the state legislature noticed this in their full term. They noticed that they had way more people participating and testifying and providing input than ever before, because frankly, traveling to Salem is a pretty big barrier for most people to be able to testify. So while someone like me might go testify for a couple of bills during a 6-month session, most people aren't able to do that. And so the state really recognized that, and they actually passed some laws that require now that public comment be able to be provided at public meetings virtually. And so I think that's an example of a positive that is just allowing individuals more flexibility and going to make it so that they are more able to participate in the political process. Other changes that will likely remain will be around allowing and providing some virtual services that you don't have to come into a counter for. I think the court has some innovation around that. And I think things like the library will have to reassess. The takeout program has certainly been wildly popular, and that may be something that stays as well. But everything's continuing to be reevaluated and frankly evolve over time as our needs change.
This is going to put a great reliance on broadband and broadband deployment. People are going to have to be online to get a lot of government services going forward.
That is a great point, and one that I'm really glad that is highlighted in some of the federal infrastructure plans, and also getting a lot of attention at the state and even among the Washington County Mayor's Group. That is identified as a major key infrastructure piece that's needed, and the fact that from an equity and inclusion perspective and a diversity perspective, that is a barrier that is also dividing our community further, and that needs to be addressed from that perspective.
Yeah. We still like to get together, but unfortunately this year you had to cancel the Taste of Tigard and also all of the events surrounding the 60th anniversary of the city of Tigard. That had to be a disappointment.
It certainly was, and I have to be honest with you. I was optimistic, and I even said during some public meetings as we were considering what to do about July 4th and fireworks that I was hoping we could have a very large celebration in September for the city's 60th birthday, which happens to be on September 11th. But I was hoping that during September we would be able to have some large scale events. We were just coming out of the sort of the fourth surge of COVID, and we had a lot of vaccines on board in our community, and the hope was that things would be better. Obviously, we all know what happened between the first week of July and the middle of August, and so yes, we ended up having to cancel the Taste of Tigard and a bunch of in-person events and celebrations that frankly our community I think was really looking forward to. But we're converting that all to and have made some changes to online events. We've got a really robust storytelling sort of podcast type interviews that are being done by our communications team. And I would encourage people to listen to those. They're really interesting if you want to hear about the history of Tigard and just people that helped really shape our community over the last 50 to 60 years.
I'll take you up on that. That sounds interesting. The federal government has provided cities across the nation with financial assistance in order to help those cities provide vital public services. I believe the last round of the American Rescue Plan Act had some $7 million in it for Tigard, Oregon. How are you going to use those funds going forward?
So our primary goals, and the city council's had a lot of discussion about this. So first of all, as a base to think about this, is we already have our city's goals and objectives established. And so when we're looking at additional money that can be used for many different purposes, we're going to be looking at what our established and previously established goals are and what we can use that money to help achieve. That's one sort of base I would start with. But then I will also share that our council in particular is very concerned about residents that are continuing to struggle. And we've taken many actions there to try to support residents. We've taken many actions to support businesses. And we continue to evaluate that. And that takes many different forms. We delayed rate increases for our utility programs, our utility functions. We have helped businesses with loans, forgivable loans. And what we did early on with COVID is leveraged our money and got a bunch of private money involved to help businesses even further. And then we provided some grants. The last thing that we're also doing for residents and really to care for our community is providing funding to nonprofits in our community. And we're doing a third round of that. So that's called the RAFT program, the Resident Aid Fund of Tigard. And then continuing with utility assistance, we did implement delayed utility rate increases. Those were essentially delayed an entire year. And we started to get to a point where we were really going to have trouble maintaining our utilities if we did not take action. So we did delay it a year. And so that did provide some relief.
Overall, how would you characterize how Tigard has survived the pandemic? Did you thrive? Did you just get by? What would be your characterization?
Well, I think it's I think in a community of 54,000 people, it's hard to, just provide one description of that, because really there are people that are struggling. There's, you know, continued challenges with houselessness and homeless individuals in our community that are really in need. And they were really impacted by some of the changes that we had to make early on around closing the library, closing or locking public bathrooms. It made it very difficult for a homeless individual, with all the businesses closed as well, to even find a place to go to the bathroom. And that seems so simple and kind of absurd that that's a barrier in Tigard, but those are the kinds of things that ended up being very challenging for some. And many businesses sort of got by or did the best they could. I think many residents struggled, and some got by, some did really well. I mean, there are individuals in the community who were not directly impacted by employment changes and really did well. But there's not one description. What I'm proud of is how our community reacted and came together and really took care of members of our community that were vulnerable and needed assistance. And I think we've done that really about as well as could have with the limited resources we have.
Yeah. You brought up homelessness. It's a problem across the metro area. It seems to be more acute in Portland, but it's spreading to the suburbs. Has the pandemic changed the way that Tigard is going to be dealing with homelessness going forward?
I don't know that the pandemic has, but we have certainly noticed changes in the last 9 months, I would say, that are making us really have to work harder on homeless and houseless issues and individuals. What we've noticed in downtown, we've always had some homeless individuals that call Tigard home, that are Tigard residents and community members, and we've always kind of worked well. I think some of our downtown business owners would describe the fact that they've had kind of a symbiotic relationship that's worked relatively well, where they'll provide some things like the use of restrooms, et cetera, for homeless individuals. And those same homeless individuals will watch out for their businesses and provide them information and maybe even, protect things when no one else is around. And that's gone really well for many years. And those individuals were, not particularly visible in the community. What's changed is there are now more individuals, some of whom we're less familiar with. So they're not, they're sort of newer to our community, but also really some behavioral, I would say, challenges in our downtown community and also throughout the city, but particularly became acute in downtown with just individuals displaying behavior that is, concerning to most individuals. Seems either threatening or unsafe to many, and certainly our business community wants people coming to our downtown to feel welcome and safe. And that same challenge is really present on our trail system too, near downtown, and we're doing a lot to address that. And we've had a number of discussions with our downtown business community. We had a very robust city council discussion. We've actually had probably 3 of them, but the most robust one about 2 weeks ago, where we walked through what the city's done to both assess that situation and to immediately respond, and have already seen some positive improvement. But we've got a long ways to go, and we need to continue connecting these individuals to services, at least the ones that are willing to accept them.
Tigard's not really in that kind of service delivery system. It's more a county problem there, isn't it?
Well, county and state, I mean, if you, I'm not suggesting everybody that's houseless has mental health issues, but, there's certainly some overlap there. Yeah, there's some overlap there. And I would say that the state in particular and the county and our healthcare systems have responsibility for taking care of people with mental health challenges and issues. And our country has not done a good job of that over the last 40 to 50 years. And we see the results of that in many situations. our first responders end up being on the front line of dealing with a lot of those situations, and that's not really how we should be handling, from my perspective, how our country should be handling those issues. But no, the provision of mental health care and healthcare in general is not a city function. It's a county and a
Yeah.
state function.
Yet Tigard can't do it alone. You've got to work with the other cities in Washington County. You've got to work with the county itself. Are you comfortable with the progress that's being made with that cooperative effort?
I am, because we're continuing to work at it and continuing to coordinate. The county's actually taken a pretty big step forward with an encampment monitoring and assessment program that we have joined and partnered with, to make sure that the encampments that are appearing are safe and not posing threats and harm to the environment, and those kinds of things. And we're all doing that together. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I want to see the Metro money from the Here Together campaign for wraparound services for houseless individuals. I want to see that actually in action before I give you a full. I'm super happy and comfortable with how this is going.
Yeah, the proof is in the building.
Yeah, and in the action. I mean,
Yeah.
let's see individuals being taken care of and their needs being met.
As mayor, you hear from your residents quite considerably, I would imagine. What do you tell them when they come to you and they're scared, they're fearful, they're anxious about homeless people or other things that are going on in the city? What's your advice to them?
Well, first of all, I listen very carefully to what they're sharing. And, the vast majority of homeless individuals or houseless individuals are not a threat. And in fact, a lot of people have sort of gotten over that feeling of being unsafe in many situations when there's simply just a houseless individual present. But many people do remain afraid, and I try to listen to what they're sharing and tailor my advice and thoughts. Many of them have questions about why the city isn't or can't do certain things. So I do a lot of explaining of the recent case law decisions out of the Ninth Circuit in both the Boise decision and the Grants Pass decisions, both of which have really affected what government entities can do related to houseless individuals on public property.
Yeah. If I could, I'd like to talk about high school football for just a moment. I know that's a subject that's dear to your heart. Tigard High School's
Absolutely.
football team recently played the team from Newburgh High School. The school board in Newburgh is debating whether or not to ban Black Lives Matter and gay pride flags and symbols from their classrooms. Before that game between Newburgh and Tigard, it was in Tigard, by the way, the team from Tigard took a knee during the national anthem. There were lots of signs of support for BLM and gay pride in the stands, and they played the game. Tigard won. That's a good thing. As mayor of Tigard, how do you feel about the pregame activities that went on?
Well, I'm fully supportive of them, and I think it's really important to set the stage for what was really happening here, because the Newburgh students and the Tigard students were standing in solidarity with each other, and the Tigard students supporting them. And I actually went to the game with a Pride and BLM item on my clothing, really to stand and support with the students from both schools. I think that it's the right thing to do. Our community clearly stands for inclusion and a way that is, and diversity and equity in a way that really means everyone is welcome. And when we say that, we mean it. And things like banning Black Lives Matter signs and things that represent the LGBTQ community are not supportive of that vision. And so from that perspective, I'm really proud of our students for taking the lead on that. We've got some excellent student leaders in the Tigard community, and I'm just glad that they stepped up and took a stand and did it to support the Newburgh students.
The young people are going to show us the way, aren't they?
Well, they are the future, and they're all going to be doing our job soon. So
They have to do it. You talked about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's become something of a catchphrase in local governments over recent years. The whole idea of diversifying governmental workforces and giving underrepresented communities of color and ethnic heritage an equal opportunity to work and advance, and including as many people of different backgrounds in the workforce seems like a great idea. But can it realistically take place in our lifetimes?
Well, I think that's a great question, Eric, and one that, as a leader, I think our roles are to, or my role is to move forward as much progress as I can. I don't know whether there's a finish line where we will say, okay, we've now arrived. I tend to not think so. With at least we're far enough away from it in our country and our culture that I don't really think in those terms related to this subject. I think we're going to be continually working at it, and for decades, if not longer. And so, to me, we have to take incremental steps. I strongly believe that our workforce and our community, our workforce at the city, should reflect the diversity in our community. And we've made progress there, but have more progress to make. The police chief actually monitors this pretty closely. She's very interested in making sure that our police workforce represents the diversity in our community.
It's a work in progress.
It is, and that is just one example. We have so many things and so many activities and initiatives, and some of it is just what seems like might be kind of a simple change, but has a big impact. As a city, we stopped reviewing resumes with names on them. Doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it completely changes the dynamic on some level when you are blindly reviewing resumes and qualifications without knowing someone's name or where they live. That as a first step in the process. That's one thing we know that's evidence-based practice. Another thing we know is that if there's more than one candidate that's got some significant diversity in the final candidate pool, usually the whole final candidate pool is similarly qualified or close to it. And so we know that if there's more than one diverse candidate in the final candidate pool, it is much more likely that a diverse candidate will be hired. These are just, again, evidence-based practices that are things that we can do and change to improve making sure that our workforce reflects the diversity in our community.
If I might turn your attention now to an issue that plagues Tigard and all of Washington County, and that's the issue of transportation. It seems to a lot of folks who live in Washington County that ODOT and Portland get the bulk of the attention when it comes to solving transportation problems. I know you don't feel that way, but I also know that you feel that Tigard needs a little bit more help with the transportation issues that it faces. What are some of the challenges that are going to face you immediately with that?
Well, we continue to advocate for our community, and while Portland may get or appear to get some attention, Washington County, frankly, has done, if you look at the 3 Oregon counties in the metro area, we've by far done the best job as a county around transportation. And that is sort of well accepted. And part of our, and when I say our, I'm referring to our Washington County group of mayors and county leaders. We want to make sure that just because we've done a good job doesn't mean that we get ignored. we've done a good job, and we deserve to continue to receive an equitable share of the funding for transportation. We also need those transportation projects to meet our needs. But there are also transportation projects that are not directly in Tigard or in Washington County that dramatically affect businesses and individuals in our community. And those are regional projects like the work that's planned for the 205. There are hundreds or thousands of businesses in Washington County that care deeply about being able to move freight and people through the 205 corridor and also through the Rose Corridor bottleneck. Those are two regional projects that, even though they're not technically in Washington County, we care deeply about them, and they will affect us greatly.
Yeah,
We continue
indeed.
to advocate. We continue to advocate for projects like the Southwest Corridor. I've continued to push ODOT on more work for 99W and at least money to study what needs to happen on 99W. So the next time there is a big infrastructure funding opportunity, that we have a project that's ready and we already know what needs to be done. So that's what we're
Excellent.
doing.
Good. Along with the issue of transportation comes the issue of climate change. Too many emitting vehicles are without doubt the biggest contributors to the egregious changes in our climate. What is the city of Tigard doing to address the issue of climate change?
So in our last council goal setting, that was actually identified as an area, and it was identified before that, but we've now got it, really set as a major goal, and community resiliency overall, and climate change is one of the areas that is set to be addressed in our community resiliency planning. There are many things that can be done. There are innovations that are changing. For example, the way that I think we need to be thinking about our police fleet. We drive hundreds of thousands of miles a year in our police fleet with a lot of vehicles. And there are now excellent electric options that are much cheaper to operate. So I'm personally pushing the city on that as a specific tactic. My job and our council's job is not necessarily to push individual tactics on how to achieve results. That's really the city leadership team's responsibility after the council sets the goals. But, we do get to provide our input on tactics that we think should be considered. And that's an example of one that I'm pushing pretty heavily on, because I think it's an example where we can do better for the environment and save money for our city and provide a better functioning police vehicle. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer, but that's got to get worked through.
I can't wait to see the high-speed chase involving an electric vehicle.
Yeah, it'll be different than having owned a couple of electric vehicles. It's a different scenario as far as acceleration and driving, and frankly, just some basic safety elements too.
Indeed. Well, we have time for one more question. Election season is just around the corner. The May election is looming for a lot of local races, and one of them will be for Tigard mayor. Would you like to let us know what your plans are for 2022?
Well, the Tigard mayor election is actually in November of 2022, but I was asked this question during one of my Facebook Live fireside chat. We were calling them poolside chats during the summer. So during one of the poolside chats, I was asked about whether I was running for re-election, or really someone kind of, begging might not be the right word, but prodding me to state I was running for re-election. And so when they asked, I did announce and indicate that I was running for re-election. I actually issued a press release that evening. I always answer questions as honestly as I can and as transparently as I can. And that was an example of where I knew the answer. I am running for re-election in November of 2022.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to talking to you again in 2022. Jason Snyder is the mayor of Tigard, Oregon. He's been on City Talk. I'm Eric Schmidt. Thank you all for tuning in.